Welcome back, friendos. So everyone always asks when Caspian, what's going on with everyone's favourite indie MMORPG game developer. And of course, I've not covered it all too much lately because realistically, what is there to cover? But he posted and essentially said this is the most excited he's been about an update, about any previous update. So give him another day and he'll post it. And then he just posted what he usually does, a bunch of tech nonsense, a bunch of tech babble that nobody really cares about looking at, and people who do know anything about game development generally just go over this with a fine-tooth comb and say, it's like a chef. You ask a chef how to make, a fairly simple dish, and when he describes how he's going to make it, he's not like, oh, I boil the water and then I put in the pasta or whatever. He's like just going into insane details on, I fill out a measurement in a golden glass and then I do it in this specific pan, and this pan is made over here and it has this property, and he just goes into detail on things nobody needs to know, and it's a little bit weird, to be honest. Don't know why he's doing it. Potentially the lawsuit situation, but the one thing I did find interesting is he has these dev journals which are essentially him just talking about stuff. And I think this is probably more interesting for people who aren't tech-minded, who aren't, game developers. So we're going to read this instead, because content. Hello, and welcome to the second edition of my new developer journal series. I'm excited to share these new developer blogs with you. Unlike our product update, which focused solely on the development progress of CoE and KoE, these journals allow me to explore a wider range of topics. The only topic anyone cares about is when MMO. Don't really know why anyone cares about any of this other stuff, but we'll see. Maybe there's something interesting. In this series, he's going to delve into the challenges he's faced, lessons he's learned, and experiences he's encountered while running an indie game studio, in particular, a game studio that ran a successful Kickstarter campaign, raised approximately $6.5 million more in crowdfunding over the next 3 years, and developed the foundation of a working MMO, all while making virtually every mistake possible. At least this is self-aware. You could obviously add in a couple more lines of text like, raised all this money, didn't deliver fuck all, gave nobody any game, have no fans, but I'm not saying it's an admirable perspective, but it is a unique one. Hopefully others can learn from my mistakes. Yeah, don't have the opportunity for others to learn from your mistakes though, because people like you killed any hope of crowdfunding for MMORPGs. Essentially, at this point, nobody's ever going to fund another one. Everyone's so jaded by the experience because all of them that took money have materialized with virtually nothing or essentially nothing. The rest of this blog is organized chronologically. While I recommend reading from start to finish, you can skip to the specific lesson or year that captures your interest. Knowledge versus experience. No more funding. No more fears. No more failures. No more fucks. And the conclusion. This is going to be juicy. I can't wait. Maybe he's going to peel back the curtain a little bit and let us in on some details we didn't already know. Let's see. As the Chronicles of Elyria historian myself, maybe there'll be something cool. So over the last few years, I've dedicated considerable time to learning. Cool. Glad the fans paid for your learning, I guess. This education came from reading books and reflecting on my choices and experience from 2016 to present. The latter was particularly impactful as I could apply the knowledge gained from my reading to my personal experiences. Knowledge is understanding how to do a thing. Experience is understanding how not to do it. For the remainder of this blog post, I want to walk you through the last 3 years of my life, highlighting the most influential aspects of each year, and I'll also discuss some of the books I read during this period and explain why they were so impactful to me. Consider this as an overview of potential future blog posts offering deeper insights. We're basically just playing shrink to Caspian at this point, and I'm all for it. If there's one thing you should take away from this post, the references I provide below can serve as a reading list for anyone interested in starting a new company or struggling with one. Yeah, just take advice from me. Just raised $8 point something million and provided zero product to anybody and got to the point where nobody would give me any money, but didn't even tell them we were running out of money and instead fired everybody and then went on to get sued. If you're interested in doing all those things, just don't read anything at all, and you'll probably get there on your own anyway. No more funding. Undoubtedly, 2020 was a challenging year for everyone, including myself, after a month of voluntary work from home due to the I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that word on YouTube. Washington state mandated work from home for everyone for this foreseeable future. Our Settlers of Elyria event appeared as though it would be an abject failure, and my colleagues in the industry began losing their jobs due to downsizing. These challenges forced me to make a difficult decision. I had to stop crowdfunding and pursue alternate means of funding for Soulbound Studios if I was going to ensure its long-term success. You said you were going to have to do that in 2016. So the fact that you got no funding in those 4 years and then got to the point where you were like, oh, now I definitely can't do crowdfunding anymore. We have no money left, by the way, so I have no time to find additional funding. Just a complete failure of operating a business, really. Unfortunately, this choice also meant letting go of some or all of my employees until I could identify a better path forward. You did literally just fire everybody, didn't you? Like, everybody was let go on the same day. That's how it happened. Naturally, I expected the news would come as a disappointment and shock to most of our community, but in all honesty, I never could have imagined what would happen next. People started taking him to court and reporting him to the Washington State Attorney General. I could imagine, because people don't like it when you take their money and lie to them, show them no evidence you even used their money in a way that wasn't fraudulent, not making an accusation, by the way, just saying you showed no evidence. He even said he would have a forensic accounting done and then release it and show people. I'm like 90% sure he said that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could go find it at some point, because I do plan on doing another video where I go through from the very beginning of all of these dev blog posts, where he essentially was laying out what I'm going to do and when it's going to be ready by, and just see how many additional delays there's been and how far behind it was. Because he said, I'm pretty sure Kingdoms of Elyria settlements, like the MMO portion of it, was going to be done this year, and there's not even an alpha version of it available now, as far as I'm aware. So it's got to be multiple years behind on the thing that's multiple years behind the MMO. So it's all a bit wild. In short, community members who had only a day prior supported us started making wild accusations that I was closing the studio to run away with 4 years worth of crowdfunding. I didn't see anybody doing this, but perhaps some people did, because some people aren't very clever. Obviously, in fact, I will vouch for him here, because I've seen comments on my own videos where people think that there was no studio, there was no employees, there was no money spent, and it was just Caspian sitting at home, jerking off in his basement or something, and just waiting for 4 years, and then saying, oh, we've run out of money, bye everyone, and then ran away with 8 mil. It didn't happen. I've spoke to employees. It just factually didn't happen. So the money was spent. It was just spent very poorly, and people have a right to know how their money was spent. I obviously come at this from the angle of, like, as a consumer, if, for instance, I was going to say to you now, I'm going to make a product for the community and I'm going to fund it with the community's money, I would feel obligated to make it as transparent as possible. And if it went badly, to just show everyone the invoices and the finances and say, this was your money. It was all your money. And you allowed me to do this, and I paid myself a salary and fed my family for X months with your money. So here it all is, and here's the stuff we had, and it's yours now. We failed, but at least you get to see that it wasn't fraudulent in any way, and I wasn't paying myself a crazy amount of money, and there wasn't anything untoward going on. But obviously he doesn't feel that impetus whatsoever. He's not released anything. Nobody knows the finances. Nobody knows nobody's seen any of the game. Nobody's played any of the game. It's just ridiculous. So that's why people are making claims like that. I don't agree with them. They're obviously wrong. But at the same time, I know where they come from, because you showed people nothing to the contrary, essentially. Even now, nobody's seen fuck all. So they claim that the development work, including photos, renders, concept art, multiple trips to PAX, demos, gameplay videos, dozens of hired employees, and thousands of interactions across our forums, in person and via Discord, were all part of an elaborate hoax. Didn't see anybody going into that depth. But then again, I've had people write, 20-page manifestos about me, because I said their video game that they don't like isn't very good, or the company running it is doing anti-consumer things. So, do I believe some people did this? Yes. Would I put this in a blog post and say that everybody's doing this? No, of course not. Furthermore, they were accusing him of buying a new house, buying new cars, planning to travel the world on a yacht, and worst of all, being a scam artist. Now, obviously, I've just gone over that. I don't personally think it was a scam. I think it was just negligent incompetence, essentially. Naturally, all these accusations were unsubstantiated bullshit, but for some reason, it seemed easier for people to believe than the simpler truth. I decided to pause sales and stop hemorrhaging cash until we were on sturdy ground and had a less risky path forward. But as the old saying goes, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. Essentially the only money they had left, as far as I'm aware, because I did napkin math on the funds in the first place, which is when I declared it'd be going bankrupt pretty soon anyways, was PPP loans, which of course people are now calling, a massive fraud on the state in the United States, where essentially people had taken in billions corporations took in billions of PPP loans. They've never been paid back. Nobody cares. And a lot of the people who were taking in PPP loans have essentially just gone and spent them on things for CEOs and things like that, when they're obviously supposed to be used to guarantee employment of people that were on staff and would have otherwise been let go during COVID, which obviously he didn't do because he fired all the staff, which to me seems a little bit odd, but not my area of expertise. So within 48 hours, numerous articles, Reddit posts, YouTube videos and more began accusing me of being a scammer, instead of recognizing the hard work of the 20 plus people who were tirelessly worked alongside me for over 3 years. Instead of asking what was next, what we needed, or even just giving us the time to work on our path forward, people were quite literally calling for my head. Didn't see this, but again, I do believe it because people are like that on the internet. People began doxing my family and I, and a Google Street View of my house circulated the internet with messages about getting revenge if they couldn't get their money. Obviously, totally unreasonable. Completely chastise anyone who would do this in any community. You are also the problem at that point. It's just completely unreasonable. And also a crime, amazingly. So then I started getting emails telling me to take the money and run and never stop running, insinuating something bad if they found me. Yeah, I don't not believe him. So my family and I were terrified. I didn't sleep for months, waking regularly with night terrors and cold sweats. I'd have to circle the house every hour of the night, checking the windows and locks, peeking in on my preteens to ensure they were safe in their beds. It's rough. Yeah, it is what it is. Now I should pause briefly to state that I've struggled with depression for over 20 years. I have a chemical imbalance likely due to genetics on my mother's side, which generally requires medication, but I'd managed to stave off the depression for most of my life with diet and regular exercise, save for one other time in 2017, but by June of 2020, I'd reached a new low. I was in a deep, dark place, sitting in my bathtub late at night, searching for the least painful... I don't even think I can say that, but you know where that's going in Minecraft. So when I came upon a website with a quote from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Actually, a really good quote. Yeah, really good quote. This is getting a little bit deep, to be honest, considering it's about a video game studio, but I knew there was going to be something in here that we'd not heard before. So I don't know why that hit me the way that it did, but for some reason, I started researching the quote's origin instead of continuing what I was doing, and this led him to a book by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way. And while I won't provide an in-depth book report, The Obstacle is the Way was a very approachable read that provided examples of other people's far worse struggles than I, who managed to make it through, as well as a simple introduction to modern Stoicism. Again, while I won't attempt to teach the principles of modern Stoicism here, it was like a warm blanket for me. Suddenly, I didn't feel so alone. This was the first time I'd felt that way in years, despite the hate and rage directed at me. Having grown up with caretakers who were far more familiar with AA than I normally discuss, the principles of modern Stoicism seemed oddly familiar to the Serenity Prayer. Yeah, I'm not going to start reading the prayers, not really my thing. So he resolved to be stoic. Good. If you're ever going to do anything on the internet, you probably need a little bit of stoicism, to be honest. People on the internet aren't very nice. So I got help from my depression and began accepting that life is like a stream flowing downhill. It generally continues along its current path until it encounters some obstacle. In some cases, it simply goes over or through it, but sometimes the barriers deflect the stream, and in doing so, put it on a new path. I was on a new path now, and that was okay. After reading both The Obstacles is the Way and picking up the Daily Stoic, I was looking up additional quotes on Stoicism when, arbitrarily, I encountered another quote that's often incorrectly attributed to Mark Twain. The person who does not read has no advantage over the person who cannot read. Man, he's dropping out some gems here. So now up to that point, I'd been a regular reader of fantasy literature. Yeah, favourite. The first design journal I ever made about CoE was back in 2000. I read this. It was fairly interesting. It was a design treatment titled Taveran, as the concept for CoE began as an idea for a Wheel of Time MMO. Just pitch it to Amazon. They love making and failing making MMOs, and also making shit Wheel of Time television shows. So that said, I'd never been one to read self-help or other non-fiction books. Sure, I had a BSc in psychology, flex, but after school, I'd never sought to read books on leadership, corporate culture, fundraising, networking, negotiating, etc. There was a whole skill set that I didn't have, and strangely didn't even know I didn't have. Sure, I knew I wasn't an expert on how to do those things, but I didn't realize how much research and energy had already gone into studying those topics, and how much I didn't know. Obviously, hindsight's amazing, but at this point, you basically already massacred your company's chances of doing anything. So I began reading as voraciously as I could, generally speaking a couple of books a month. Some of my favourites in 2020 were Start With Why by Simon Sinek, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, and The 4 Disciplines of Execution by Sean Covey. Sean Covey, maybe? So the first one is because Simon Sinek is a contagious optimist. In reading Start With Why, I was inspired to understand what about CoE made people love it, but just as importantly, why I needed to make it, what hole did it fill in society, and what was its purpose. Man, this is a massive section talking about books. Holy shit, I don't know if I'm going to get through all this. As I've communicated before, CoE's why is concisely described in our mission statement: to enrich people's lives with experiences that fuel imagination and provide accessible, engaging, and meaningful interaction through entertainment and technology. It does just sound like lip service, but it's not apparently. People walk around daily making unconscious decisions based on other people's ages, weights, perceived gender, height, skin color, etc., and it's programmed in. It's our lizard brains trying to help us survive. It doesn't know that we don't need it anymore. And time again, it's been shown that when you remove those implicit biases and get to know someone, there's almost always the possibility of a deeper connection. Online games, particularly online worlds, provide the opportunity, the unique opportunity to let people be whoever they want to be, eliminating the sources of bias that often interfere with personal relationship building in the modern world. Not wrong. This is a very good point of why online games are what they are to a lot of people, myself included. So being reminded of the why of Soulbound Studios, I became more determined than ever to see it succeed. I just needed a way forward. I'd spent the better part of the year dealing with legal threats and trying to find a path that involved getting new external funding sources. And for anyone who doesn't know, the legal threats were made good. People did file a class action lawsuit eventually, which there's still some ongoing stuff with that, but I've not really been keeping up to date. It's mostly been swatted down, I think. So I'd even shopped around to try and sell Soulbound Studios to a good home that would guarantee CoE's continued development. I actually reported on this at one point. Allegedly, according to my sources, it was the CEO of Exola who was essentially forcing this, and there was some weird stuff going on behind the scenes, but I don't want to get super into depth on that without going back and checking specifically what was said. So, but with all the hostility and negative press around Soulbound, nobody wanted to acquire what had become a poison pill. Also, there was no evidence, as far as I'm aware, again, we've had no evidence that there was anything worth buying or investing in. And again, like I say, the Exola CEO was pretty keen on shopping this around to studios that he was involved with to essentially try to get somebody to recoup money that he thought he was going to have to eat due to the refund policy and things like that with Exola. So around this time, I revisited what I'd initiated in around November 2019, Kingdoms of Elyria. KOE had originally been started in late 2019 as a way to address community needs. Unfortunately, the original work done on KOE wouldn't survive the layoffs. I don't even know what this means. The original work wouldn't why? But in light of our mission statement and our need for funding to resume development on the larger COE, developing KOE looked to be the best path forward. It would enrich people's lives, fuel imaginations, allow them to engage and create opportunities for meaningful interaction. And it also addressed our financial needs. It hasn't. It hasn't. There's been no money made from this. So the revenue from KOE would be used to finish funding the development of COE. Now with more engineering work under our belt, it was a solid plan. It hasn't worked. So the second book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, is perhaps my favourite business book. It's a no-nonsense book from a successful entrepreneur and one of the co-founders of Anderson Horowitz, the well-known venture capital firm. But like many successful entrepreneurs, Ben was only super successful once he was. He made a ton of mistakes along the way because, well, hard things are hard. True. I know that sounds flippant, but it isn't. And as with the difference between knowledge and experience, you can only understand what it's like to be a CEO and how hard it is once you've experienced it. True. So sure, there are plenty of books on how to hire the right people, how to raise venture capital, how to negotiate, but those aren't the hard things. Well, how easy were they then? Because you didn't do any of those. You didn't raise any money. There was no VC. There was no deals to get Chronicles of Elyria in the hands of the people. It never happened. So a hard thing is when you've hired your best friend to do your company's UI, UX, and web design, only to outgrow their skills 2 years later and need to fire them. That's hard. It's really not. I think pretty much the easiest and most common sense advice most people give you in life is never work with people that you have personal relationships with, especially if you're the boss, because it just never ends well. You can't be a boss if somebody's your friend. There are a few books written about how to fire your best friend. Just do it. Just do it. Another hard thing is when, regardless of your efforts, you're unable to find a good engineer willing to join the company, and now must make the decision to either pivot and push forward as best as you can, or fire your content creators, skilled creators you'll ultimately need in the long term to reduce costs in the short term. I just don't understand how, in the area that they're in, where they open their office, is the really expensive part of Washington, where I think the Valve studio is like across the street or something. So if you can't find a competent, good engineer in that area, I don't know what you've done wrong. I don't know why nobody would join you, but that seems like a you problem in your studio and something you were doing. So a hard thing is hiring someone from within your games community, someone well known and respected, only to discover they lack the full set of skills you need and are prone to making critical errors. Also not hard. Don't hire people from the community, and if they're bad, fire them. But if you do fire them, there's a possibility they could become toxic and do harm to the company's reputation within the community. Not your problem. They should have signed something when they joined, and in which case you have legal recourse if they leak things. It is what it is. So they don't write books about those things because they're hard. They don't seem that difficult in my eyes, but what do I know? They're nuanced, and generally speaking, there's no right or wrong answer. One of my favourite passages in Ben's book is the idea that if you've done your job well and hired smart people, then your leadership team is capable of handling the day-to-day problems of the organisation. Whether that's people's problem or production problems, influencer problems, customer service problems, etc., they're smart. They can deal with it. The smarter or more capable your leadership team, the fewer problems land on your desk because, well, they've been handled. But the caveat is that the smarter your leadership team, the more challenging the problems are that do land on your desk. When a problem lands on your desk, it's no longer a question of the good versus bad option. It's a choice between the bad versus cataclysmic. So what's the takeaway from 2020? Well, there's a few. He didn't talk in this at all about when they wasted hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars with Spatial OS and then just decided to drop it and essentially need to start from scratch on a whole bunch of stuff related to networking in the back end. So number one, bad things happen. Some you can change, some you can't. Knowing the difference is often the most difficult part. But when bad things happen, look at them as opportunities to find a new path forward. What stands in the way becomes the way. Number two, no matter how positive your intent is, you can't always anticipate people's reactions to your efforts. This one was, again, while I completely condemn people doing the extra stuff, people being upset that they trusted you, gave you money, supported you the whole time, paid your rent, your mortgage, whatever it is, and put food on your family's table, and you didn't show them any of the respect in return, and have shown them no transparency since then, you can then not be upset when people turn around and really lose their shit at you. I do think, again, completely condemn people that go crazy and do all this wild stuff that is illegal. You can't expect any differently, and you are also part of the problem in perpetuating this by not doing the things that I've said and being transparent and giving people no reason to doubt you. I don't think people would have been anywhere near as mad if you just came out cards on table and said, here's the stuff we've got, check it out, we've run out of money so we need help immediately, or we're going to have to close, and that's it. Everything, we'll provide our books and everything to see that nothing has been going on that's untoward. But the minute you don't do that and then never show anybody anything and be caught lying repeatedly, yeah, it's hard to have sympathy in that scenario. So the only reasonable course of action is to be authentic and hope to hell people understand. I don't see any authenticity with this. So the more consistent your character, the more likely they are to understand your motivations. And more importantly, if trust is ever broken, you need more engagement, not less, which, again, he didn't do. If possible, the last thing you want to do is retreat even out of fear. Number 3, understand your motivations, understand your why, and stay true to it. It's your North Star. And with every choice on your desk, ask yourself which most directly achieves your mission. In my case, it was always a question of which choice best shows love for your community. Just delete the Discord, delete the forums, stop replying to people on Twitter, turn off the comment section on YouTube. Really shows that love. So running a business is hard, like really hard. It's lonely at the top, and if you've done your job right, you'll still regularly face difficult challenges with no clear answer. You'll make the best decision you can with the information you have, and sometimes you'll be right, and sometimes you'll be wrong, and sometimes you'll be really wrong. No more fears. By the end of 2020, I'd resolved to push forward with KOE as a means to an end. It was always intended to be a playable Unity or web experience focused on the holdings mechanics with a top-down UX, but now it needed to be a standalone product if we were going to get back on track. The problem was, I was still terrified of everything. Okay? I was afraid of checking my mail and email, answering my phone, going online and reading comments about me in the studio. I still feared going to bed every night, being sued, running out of funds, and having to fire more of my staff. At this point, we were told that there was no staff. And then later on, he talked about there being him and Snipe Hunter. And I don't think there was anybody else, but I don't remember. Don't quote me on that one. It's been a while. So I spent virtually every waking minute of every day thinking about something terrifying. I know them feels. And then in early 2021, my biggest fear came true. Even though our finances were dwindling rapidly and we had only enough money to finish the development of the current scope of KOE, someone had filed a class action lawsuit against Soulbound Studios. I won't go into details of the lawsuit, but I will confess it never made sense to me. We received a pre-litigation demand letter in 2020 that we refund everyone's money or else. But with what money? I said this when I saw this letter in particular, because I went through it all on video. I think you'll be able to find the video and me talking about it at the time. It made no sense to me that their demand was refund everybody's money. Because, again, with what money? I agree with Caspian's take on this one. I never thought I'd say that. It's not like we made 8 million in the previous 30 days and we're sitting on it. Even a rough napkin calculator of 2 million earnings per year for 4 years, with an average of 20 employees per year making an average of $100,000 a year in costs, meant there was no money to refund. This is exactly what I did. Again, a couple months before Chronicles of Elyria even announced they had financial problems. It was super obvious from the outside, so I'd imagine a lawyer would know this is the case. So it's 8 million in and 8 million out. We responded accordingly. I let the sender know that we were continuing with the development. There was no fraud or misrepresentation. We had no money to refund everyone. I was working without income, and that an independent firm had conducted a forensic accounting of Soulbound's expenditure and found everything to be in order. He said he was going to release this. Never happened. Hasn't happened to date. So we only have his word on this one. I was happy to negotiate with the plaintiff, but our response letter letting them know refunds were not an option was met with silence until the lawsuit. But I digress. The point is that in early 2021, I'd resolved to push forward with KOE while still living in fear over everything that had happened in 2020 and everything that may still occur in 2021. And then the worst thing imaginable to me, aside from something health-related, finally happened. I once again found it hard to move forward. So I returned to my reading in 2021. 3 of the better books I read were... I'm not going to go through the book stuff anymore because I want to finish this video within an hour. And we're currently the half an hour mark. And we're halfway through this. So I'm not going to read the book stuff. So here we go. He was there now at the end of 2021. Kingdoms Elyria was moving along rapidly for it just being a handful of us, and Soulbound Studios was being sued, but I was resolved. I knew what I needed to do and why. And strangely, with a narrowing of focus, the reminder of how small I am in the grand scheme of things and how life sometimes sucks and you have to move forward, I was suddenly no longer afraid. Cool. So what were my key takeaways from 2021? One, you can either do many things to mediocrity or a few things exceptionally. Either way, the time commitment is the same. Number two, there are few things more liberating in life than having your worst fear realized. And number three, getting sued sucks. True. Getting sued ostensibly out of revenge sucks even more. Even more true. But civil law is there to protect people and is still fundamentally good. So you must push through and take the hits as they come. Now, next section, no more failures. Which is a funny section considering there has been no success to this point. So I'd argue no more failures is just all failures. The following year went by in a bit of a blur. Started the year with no more funding, but no more fear. I started putting more and more money into the company to keep development going, but otherwise spent the first 6 months with my head down in development. During that time, he also read more books. Not going to do the books. Not doing it. Unlike a finite game, infinite games have no steadfast rules. The players can come and go from the games as they like. I won't lie, the concept reminded me much of a Meow. Okay. A multiplayer evolving online world like Chronicles of Elyria, but parallels between MMOs like CoE and an infinite game aside, with no win condition, the focus of any company planning to survive past its owner needs to focus instead on its why, on its culture, and its ability to adapt to the market. In other words, it must be willing to iterate, try, and fail, preferably as quickly as possible. More book stuff. So he wanted to create an environment where people could have fun, chill, be friendly when out of character, and then ruthlessly play the dance of dynasties while in character. When we finally reopen the Discord server, I will be more intentional about the culture I allow to develop within our community. I care about the community's health, well-being, and ability to interact safely. And if you aren't defined by your culture on purpose, you're defined by your culture on accident. There's actually some banging quotes in here. Caspian's dropping some hardcore philosophy. So at this point, you may be asking yourself why this section's title is No More Failures. So here it is. By the time I reached this point in 2022, I'd read dozens of books since 2020. Some by CEOs, some by consultants, some by historians, etc. And no matter the source, one thing consistently stood out: failure. It was pervasive. This makes sense because business and life in general is an infinite game, and it's a continuous process of failure, learning, and improving. It occurred to me that we are encouraged to take chances and fail when we're young. We weren't born with balance. We fall, we stand up, and we fall again. But the process builds strength, and eventually we have what's necessary to stay upright. And there's a similar analogy for riding a bike and every other skill we developed before entering grade school. Unfortunately, around the time we enter schooling and begin receiving letter grades, a pretty nasty thing happens. We stop viewing failures as strength, character, and skill building opportunities, and start viewing them as true failures. Suddenly, it's like we expect people to be born knowing how to be effective communicators, inspiring leaders, or shrewd negotiators. We start grading people on how quickly they develop, whether their path is shorter or longer than someone else. We also forget that life is a journey, everyone's road is their own, and that there is no such thing as failure on continued attempts at success. This continues into adulthood with something or someone being labelled a failure if it isn't successful the first time. Even knowing the chance of success the first time we try is often immeasurably small. I mean, he's not wrong. He's not wrong, but at the same time, it's easy to obviously see through the veil here when it's somebody explaining that they took $8 million from people, and he's saying this is like, oh, I should have been given more chances. I should have been forgiven. People should have understood that I was going to fail. But at the same time, that does nothing for the fact that you did and took people's money and then haven't been held accountable in any way. And again, I don't think the guy should be in jail or something, because I don't think it was malicious. But at the same time, again, compared to what I was talking about earlier, with if I was operating a business and was crowdfunded completely, I'd want to be showing people the ongoings, right? I think that would be reasonable. It's your money at the end of the day. It's not his. It was just his turn, to use a great meme there. So throughout the rest of 2022, I made a point to remove the words fail, failed, or failure from his vocabulary, and instead set out to obtain anecdotes, adages, or other quotes that I could give to people whenever they use the word to help them understand why it's bad. Here are some of my favourites. I'm not going to read the quotes. Not going to do it. So all that said, the main takeaway for 2022 was, and this is likely dangerous close to another quote, any situation has precisely two outcomes: success and learning. Failure isn't an outcome. Failure is the condition in which you are unable or unwilling to accept one of the previous two outcomes. I don't use the word failed or failure anymore. Instead, I try to understand why the outcome is what it is, learn from it, and continue. And I encourage others around me to do the same. I think, oh my god, there's two. There's two more sections, and this one is called No More Fucks. At long last, we get to 2023, and this year was the most liberating of all. In January, I took my family to a local used bookstore where they had one of those deals where if you buy a specific number of books, you get a stupid number of used books for free. This is awesome. It was like buy 10, get 20 free. After collecting as many books as possible, we still had a few more books left over, so I picked up a physical copy of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. Good book. Contrary to the title, the book isn't about not caring. It is, but in a very nuanced way. It's about everything from accepting yourself as you are, to prioritizing what's important in your life, to picking your battles and pursuing worthwhile things, despite the obstacles you may face. It's about giving fewer fucks to the things that aren't important, and more fucks to the things that are, and not letting scary things hold you down, because who gives a fuck? The book strongly argues that life is filled with negative experiences, and fulfillment comes from surmounting those negative experiences. Put differently, if you stop giving a fuck about the trials and tribulations required to achieve your goals, you become unstoppable. You are the juggernaut. Naturally, this resonated with my learnings from previous years and acted as a capstone to it all. I resolved to make 2023 the year I wouldn't give a fuck. It's just funny because obviously the guy's being sued, everyone in his community hates him, turned against him, there's been no game released, and he's just like, don't give a fuck. Obviously, that's not what he's saying, but in a way, it kind of is, right? I would be my authentic self, use my voice, and focus on what's more important to me. Now, and this isn't an exaggeration, I've gotten into the habit of taking in every perceived negative experience and asking myself, is this worth my fucks? Because let's be honest, we have a limited amount of them to give. I'm amazed at how much better my life has been, how much more focused I am on work, and how much better my relationships with others have become since I started asking myself, is this worth giving a fuck about? More often than you might imagine, the answer is no. True. But your community who you took $8 million from, and your game you didn't deliver, probably worth giving at least one or two, you know. After that, I proceeded to read 2 more outstanding books. No, I'm not doing it. Not going to do it. But then again, he does have a thing here. Whatever the strength of a leader often becomes the weakness of the organization. E.g., if the founder is strong in marketing, the business may eventually find it's weak in this functional area. Why? Because leaders have a tendency to hold on too tight, strangling the efforts of those around them. Other leaders figure they can watch over the details, bringing in someone too junior to oversee the function versus bringing on the powerhouse they really need. Instead, leaders must make a counterintuitive decision to find people who exceed their own capabilities in the area of its strength to prevent the company from stalling. I feel called out. So what is Caspian's super strength as a leader then? I assume he's about to tell us. In the early days of Soulbound Studios, I hired a second programmer aside from myself, thinking we could do the initial work ourselves. But as I quickly discovered, being a CEO is a full-time job between HR, accounting, PR, etc. I spent much of my time preparing for development rather than developing, leaving my junior program with far too much responsibility. Don't get me wrong, he was smart, talented, and even a former student of mine. Of course, he was me, for I am the narcissist. But he was still a junior, and I didn't give him the support and oversight that he deserved to grow as an engineer. After that, I attempted to hire 5 more engineers to go from 1 to, we need 5 more. That seems a little bit like a absolute abject failure of managing a company, to think that you'd be okay with even 2 but needing 5 more, but then only having 1 but needing 5 more, instead of being like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, being like, we need 5. That seems like an insane thing for somebody who's handling a project to suddenly just need. But I knew we needed stronger programmers to support my junior and advance the engineering. My goal was to hire people better than myself, and it took 6 months to find even one other person who could pass our programming test. I'm so good that nobody could surpass me. I'm just the best, says Caspian. And while we quickly hired 3 more programmers after that, including a very talented lead, I made several new leadership mistakes because I'd never been a director before, only a lead. I still needed to learn how to manage a lead properly. I overstepped on some occasions and understepped on others. Ultimately, I allowed the development of the Soulborn engine to be moved to Node.js TypeScript against my better judgment. Put briefly, to give my lead breathing room to do their job and show I trusted them, I abdicated to them instead of delegated to them. After that, when I was ultimately forced to let my very experienced lead go, I kept my distance from the remaining senior engineers as an attempt to step in and be the new lead in the absence of an established one. It was met with a strangely hostile response, but in keeping my distance, I neglected my engineers and proved the above warning to be a truism. If necessary, I should have fired the remaining engineers, rehired a new team of engineers, and then properly delegated rather than abdicating, but I needed to be more experienced to be comfortable or even to know how to do that. So let me get this straight. He's essentially telling us that his engineers didn't like him, and his only solution was to fire them all and replace them all, but he didn't do that. So he just had a bunch of people working for him that he was leading that were hostile towards him, the CEO of the company. Man, talk about a fucking self-report. I've had loads of people say, like, why do you call Caspian incompetent? How do you know? I mean, he's just telling us now that he just mismanaged the company into the ground, which again is not, as far as I'm aware, legally reprehensible or something that he should be held accountable to, but is a adequate explanation for what happened with the business. So given all that, when in late 2022, early 2023, I found myself the only developer at Soulborn Studios, I decided to lean into my strengths, stepping back into the principal engineering role. I mean, there was literally nobody else. At this point, you were like a one-man company. So I just imagine him sitting in a room talking to himself, like, Caspian, what are you going to do tomorrow? Yeah, I'm going to be the lead engineer. What about you? Yeah, I'm also the lead engineer, for I am you. Like, what else could there even be? It was only you. So I'm in a really good place. Development is finally moving ahead at the speed and in the way I needed it to be all along. So all he needed to do was drop all the baggage. Caspian dropped all. He's basically Ice Cube from post NWA era. You know, he dropped. I didn't think I can quote that. Obviously, I'm a little bit too white to quote it. But he dropped all the dead weight. Went on his solo and just fired all his employees, and now he is now everything's going good. So this is only for a while, mind you. I'll eventually have to regrow the team, this time with the learnings I've gained over the last few years, but for now I feel good about where we are and what our prospects look like going forward. I mean, yeah, I've said this a million times and I will say it again, good luck, I guess. I want the game to come out because the people who put money into it and everything, but at the same time, you managed to raise no money while you had a team and it looked competent from the outside. So how are you going to do it now when you're admitting it was completely incompetent? You've shown nothing to anybody. You've got no money, less fans, and it is a poisoned pill now, even if it wasn't before. So if you read the latest COE development update, you may have noticed in my conclusion I commented that, quote, I occasionally receive messages from individuals advising me to give up and abandon the project. You can't do that for legal reasons. So that shouldn't surprise anyone. Even if I didn't have the unique perspective that I do, it's virtually impossible to attempt something in today's world without someone on the internet telling you to give up. True, people do that. Regardless, after reading this blog post, I hope people begin to understand why I won't. Not only is it the focus of my efforts, my reason why, and something I genuinely enjoy doing, but I've learned and grown so much over the last years that I feel I'm finally equipped to make it happen. Shame it wasn't earlier, I guess, but you know, he's not wrong on some points, talking about like how people see failure and things, and maybe I'm guilty of that, but at the same time, I don't think being aware that we don't give people enough, you know, like room to fail is something that completely forgives you for everything and your role in something and makes it so that people can't have kind of input or comment or anything else about your failures, especially when it's at the cost of other people. Like, if this was just you and your money and you just didn't make a game, people would still be mad. But people wouldn't be really mad. It's when you take people's money and then you fail on their dime that obviously they're going to be upset about it. And I don't think that's wrong. No one will ever convince me that it is. So I've also shed most of the things that were holding me back. I've lost my funding, but with it, the obligation to pay content creators without the necessary engineering staff. I've lost my fears, feelings of failures, and any fucks I had that were being misspent. Simultaneously, I've also gained a lot in the last 3 years. I've gained the support of my friends and family, a renewed focus, faith in my ability to complete the work, and the foresight to see where things are headed. So if you've suggested I give up, whether via YouTube comment, Kickstarter comments, you can't make YouTube comments anyway, turn them off, so you've definitely not done that. Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube video, nah, I'ma do my own thing. Bro, no, Caspian, please. I mean, I do in a way wish he'd give up, just because I don't see it going anywhere, but at the same time, I do wish the game would come out. Again, I have to reiterate that point. And he could do whatever he wants with his own time and money. Thankfully, he's not asked anybody for any more money, because if he was, that would be fucking insane, and I'd obviously be going hard on that. For anyone considering doing something they are passionate about, especially if they're doing it when nobody else believes they can, I leave you with this final thought, quote, "Never let someone who can't understand your value tell you what you're worth. Pledge to the continued development of the Soulborn engine and the Chronicles of Elyria, Caspian." So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting read. I had to skip some parts. I'm sure there were some nuggets of wisdom in there, and did list some good books and had some good quotes in here. But at the same time, it's a whole lot of words without the substance of showing people what you did with their money. And that is what I end all these videos with, and always will do, until he does this. Load up a live stream. You've posted a new dev blog now talking about how it's now an MMO and it's running the servers and everything on the back end, and you can actually connect the game to it and run it like an MMO. Then you literally said it's finally an MMO again. Load up a live stream, connect 2 or 3 of your friends or whatever and you, and run around and show people what you have. Take you a couple hours to set up. Will assuage a lot of the criticisms people have. Obviously, you should have done this in 2020 before you shuttered your studio and fired everybody. But you could do it now. Obviously, not going to. Probably don't watch these videos. Some people are crazy and think I have some massive hatred towards Caspian, whatever. I really don't. He seems like a nice guy, to be honest. And again, it's not a crime to fail. And I disagreed with the whole lawsuit in the very first place. I don't think it had any merit. The only reason I cared about the lawsuit was because I wanted to see the things that Caspian should show people anyway. And again, if it's other people's money and they trusted you and they funded you and they gave you that money, it is then not your business to just hide everything from everybody and show them nothing. They did this with you, and you've shown them no fucking respect whatsoever by not, just reciprocating and giving them a little bit back and showing them this is where your money went. And I just hate that shit. I think it's really pathetic and frankly, just spitting in the face of people who literally paid your bills and funded your dream. And when the dream didn't come true, you've essentially abandoned those people. Even if you continue making it, if it never materializes, if it does and you deliver the game, obviously I don't think it's going to be as good as it should have been, because you're making it on your own now. But even if you deliver on it, I do think it's still a failure, and it is still essentially abandoning those people who funded this whole thing. But yeah, as you can hear, there's somebody here cleaning at the moment. It happened in the middle of recording the video. Couldn't stop because I have a tight schedule today of other stuff I want to do. So there's going to be noise in the background of the video. There still is, and probably people walking around in the background, which is me awkwardly sat reading this video while somebody comes in, and I'm just yeah, fuck Caspian. Don't really mean that, just a joke. But yeah, a little bit cringe. Going to be streaming on Twitch later today, playing Black Desert Online. Come hang out, join the Discord, at me on Twitter, send me video suggestions, and yeah, don't be one of those weirdos that goes and threatens people that show up in my videos, or that fails making a video game. That shit's pathetic. But yeah, see you later, peace.